Claire Whitmore walked into her brother's engagement party, and it took her less than 1 minute to understand that she had not been invited there as family. She had been brought in like living proof, an old scratch her family wanted to display so they could prove they had moved past it. Her name was Claire Whitmore, 33 years old, from Chicago, and in the eyes of the Whitmore family, she had always been the child out of rhythm. Not bright enough like Ethan. Not obedient enough to please her mother. Not quiet enough to make her father comfortable, but not loud enough for anyone to truly listen. The lakeside resort in Vermont glowed beneath warm golden lights, beautiful in a way that felt cold. Tall glass windows reflected the dark lake outside, where the wind struck the surface of the water like tiny hands trying to knock at the door. Inside, the sound of glasses touching, soft laughter, and silk dresses sweeping across the polished wooden floor made everything look like a perfect painting. Claire stood at the entrance in a simple dark blue dress and a pair of shoes that had followed her through too many airports, too many law offices, too many meetings where people believed in documents but not in tears. She had driven for 7 hours because her mother had said the family needed her there, but when she arrived, Margaret Whitmore only looked her up and down and gave a faint frown, as if Claire were the only decoration mistake in that expensive room. Ethan appeared right after that. Her brother wore a cream-colored suit, his hair neatly styled, with the wide, confident smile of a man who was used to being applauded by the whole family before he had done anything at all. He placed his hand on Claire's elbow, not hard enough for outsiders to notice, but enough to remind her of every time he had pulled her out of conversations, pushed her into corners, turned her into a joke, then called it sibling love. "You came," Ethan said, his voice light, as if he were praising a child for tying her shoes. "I thought you would use work as an excuse to stay away." Claire looked at him. She wanted to say that her work mattered far more than this party. She wanted to say that her firm was handling files no one in this room would ever want mentioned out loud, but she only answered softly that their mother had told her to come. Margaret stepped closer, an ivory silk shawl resting over her shoulders. She kissed the air beside Claire's cheek without touching her skin. Harold, her father, stood beside her with a glass of wine in his hand, his gaze sliding over Claire as quickly as it would slide over a bill he did not want to pay. "Do not stand too close to the main table," Margaret whispered. "Tonight is about Ethan and Vanessa. You know how to behave." Claire had known how to behave for a very long time. She knew how to swallow answers before they reached her throat. She knew how to smile when she was criticized. She knew how to stand still while her entire family turned her into the reason they could feel better about themselves. That was what a toxic family taught a child who had never been chosen. Vanessa Kingsley entered with her parents. She was beautiful in a carefully prepared way, with soft blonde curls and a ring on her finger that flashed every time she lifted her glass. Her father, Graham Kingsley, shook Harold's hand with the easy warmth of a man who was used to being sought after. Her mother, Celeste Kingsley, watched everyone with eyes as sharp as a thin knife hidden inside silk. When Ethan pulled Claire into the middle of the group, his smile became even more dangerous. "This is Claire, my sister," he said, louder than necessary. "In every family story, I guess there is always one person who makes everyone uncomfortable. In my family, that person is her." Scattered laughter broke out. Margaret placed a hand over her chest, pretending to be embarrassed, but she did nothing to stop him. "Claire has been a little different since she was young," Margaret said. "We tried to help, but some children are simply born difficult to guide." Harold said nothing. His silence was always clean, always convenient, always pushing the blame back onto the person who had been hurt. Vanessa looked at Claire as if she were a guest who had stepped onto the wrong floor. Celeste smiled, slowly and coldly. "At least she arrived on time," Celeste said. "For some people, that is already an achievement." Claire felt the room slow down, not because she was hurt. This pain was old. It had lived inside her for so long that it knew how to breathe on its own. What caught her attention was the way Graham froze when he heard her name, the way Celeste tilted her head, the way her eyes stayed on Claire's face for one beat too long. "What is your full name?" Celeste asked. Ethan laughed. "Claire Whitmore. Do not worry, you will not need to remember it for long." But Celeste was no longer laughing. For one very brief moment, the elegant mask on her face cracked. And Claire saw it. Fear. Graham Kingsley was the kind of man who had spent his entire life making other people bow before he even finished a sentence. But in that moment, standing in front of Claire Whitmore, he stood still, as if he had just heard the name of an old debt returning to knock on his door. The air around that small group changed color very quickly. A few seconds earlier, Claire had only been the joke Ethan dragged forward to earn a laugh. A few seconds later, she became the only thing Graham Kingsley could not take his eyes off. Celeste was the first to react. She lifted her wineglass to her lips, but she did not drink. Her dark red painted fingers tightened around the stem, so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She looked at Claire one more time, and this time, it was no longer the gaze of a wealthy woman judging a girl poorer than herself. It was the gaze of someone who had just realized that the key she thought she had buried deep was now in someone else's hand. Claire felt all of it. She always felt things before other people did. That was a skill the years of growing up inside a toxic family had forced her to learn. When her mother was about to make a cruel remark, Claire knew it from the way she breathed in. When Ethan was about to lie, she knew it from the way he blinked. When her father chose silence, she knew it from the way he looked down into his glass of wine. And right now, she knew Graham Kingsley was afraid. "What do you do in Chicago?" Graham asked. The question was spoken softly, but the small room around them seemed to freeze. Ethan laughed before Claire could open her mouth. "She just does paperwork," Ethan said. "Some kind of office job. Reading files, marking spelling mistakes. Nothing you need to care about." Margaret laughed along with him, a thin and cold sound. Claire had never liked talking about her work with her family, not because she was ashamed of it, but because they had never asked in order to understand. To them, only titles that could be shown off at a dinner table were worth remembering. Doctor, lawyer, business owner. And Claire, the woman who followed stolen assets, forced signatures, and inheritances that vanished from the hands of the people who were supposed to receive them, was only the daughter who lived quietly in a rented apartment in Chicago. Claire looked at Graham, then answered calmly, "I work at Meridian Legacy Group. I review inheritance files, trusts, and family property disputes." The smile on Graham's face went out, very quickly. But Claire saw it. Celeste saw it too. Vanessa did not understand yet. She looked at her father, then at her mother, a trace of irritation crawling across her perfectly made-up face. She was not used to being left outside a secret at her own party. "Meridian Legacy Group," Graham repeated. His voice was drier than before. Ethan shrugged. "Sounds impressive, but it is probably just a few minor inheritance files. Claire always makes everything sound bigger than it is." This time, no one laughed. Claire placed her hand on the small clutch in front of her. Inside was her phone. Inside that phone were things that should not be read in the middle of an engagement party. But she did not need to take it out. Not yet. Graham stepped a little closer. "Are you handling the Ashford file?" The question dropped into the middle of the group like a glass falling from a high floor. It did not shatter right away, but everyone could hear it falling. Claire did not blink. "I do not discuss client files at a family party." That answer was polite, proper, clean, and more terrifying than any accusation. Harold finally looked up. Margaret turned toward Claire, her eyes narrowing. She did not understand what the Ashford file was, but she understood Graham's voice. She understood the shift in the way that powerful man was looking at her daughter, and that bothered her even more than the fact that Claire had been insulted. "You know Mr. Kingsley?" Margaret asked. Claire answered, "Not exactly." Celeste cut in immediately, her voice as soft as velvet laid over a blade. "I am sure it is just a coincidence. Companies like that must handle many files. Do they not, Claire?" It was the first time she had called Claire by her name, not her, not Ethan's sister, just a name, but it was enough to make Ethan frown. Claire could feel the familiar jealousy rising inside her brother. Ethan was used to being the son of the Whitmore family. If anyone looked at Claire for too long, he immediately found a way to pull the light back toward himself. He put his arm around Vanessa's shoulders and laughed loudly. "Anyway, tonight is not a business meeting. Tonight is about our wedding, about the future of two families. Two families." Claire almost wanted to laugh, because those exact words had appeared in an email chain she had read 3 weeks earlier. 2 families, 1 marriage, a piece of lakeside land. An inheritance trust bent to fit the greed of wealthy people. The Ashford file was not just a property dispute. It had started with an elderly woman signing a land transfer while her health was weak. It led to a shell company buying the land far below its true value. Then it touched Kingsley Holdings. After that, it touched another name, Whitmore. Claire had stared at that name for a long time on her computer screen. Not because she was surprised, but because at last, the broken pieces of her life had started arranging themselves into a shape. The money her grandmother left for her when she was 18, the letter she had never been allowed to see, her father's signature, her mother's silence, Ethan's business school tuition. All of it sat inside the same old, filthy chain, covered by the sentence that family had only done it because they wanted what was best for her. Graham tried to regain his composure. "I am sure you are a professional," he said quietly, "and a professional would understand that some matters are best handled in the proper place, at the proper time." Claire looked at him. "I agree." Celeste breathed out very softly, but Claire saw her shoulders lower as if she had just stepped back from the edge of a cliff. Then Claire continued, "The problem is some people chose the wrong place to lie for far too long. The silence this time was no longer elegant. It was heavy. It was raw. It pulled every face in the room closer to the truth." Ethan looked at Claire, his voice lowering. "What are you trying to do?" Claire turned to him. There was no loud anger in her eyes, only a calmness that suddenly made Ethan feel small. "I have not done anything yet," she said. "Not yet." Behind them, a server passed by with a tray of wine. The crystal glasses trembled lightly, releasing a thin sound like a warning. Vanessa pulled at her mother's hand. "Mom, what is the Ashford file?" Celeste did not answer. And that was the exact moment Vanessa began to be afraid. Ethan Whitmore made the biggest mistake of his life when he thought Claire was still the little sister he could push into a corner with one cruel joke. He stepped forward, his smile no longer carrying the same confidence it had at the beginning, but the arrogance was still there. He did not understand why Graham Kingsley had gone pale. He did not understand why Celeste had fallen silent. He did not understand why Vanessa was looking at her parents as if, for the first time, she realized there were doors inside that wealthy house that had been locked from the inside. To Ethan, this was still just Claire making everything dramatic. "You are ruining my party," he said, his voice low, but loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "You always do this. You cannot stand it when someone else is happy." Claire looked at him for a long time. In that moment, she remembered the old kitchen in the suburbs of Chicago, where Ethan had once laughed while she cried over losing her scholarship. She remembered her mother standing beside the refrigerator, saying that girls should be more realistic. She remembered her father signing papers he claimed were meant to protect her future. She remembered being 18 when she thought her grandmother had only left her a few pieces of old jewelry, while the truth was that an inheritance had been moved out of her hands before she even knew it existed. Claire set her glass of water down on the table. "No," she said, "I am not ruining this party. I only arrived at the exact moment it began revealing what it really was." That sentence dropped the room into a sharp, icy silence. Margaret stepped forward, her lips pressed tight. "Claire, enough. You are embarrassing this family." Claire turned to her mother. No trembling, no looking away. "You still think the shameful part is me telling the truth, not the fact that you hid it for all these years." Harold tightened his grip around his wineglass. He wanted to say something, but the habit of silence had grown so deeply inside him that even when he needed to save himself, he did not know where to begin. Graham lowered his voice. "Miss Whitmore, I think we should speak privately." Claire looked at him. "You had years to speak privately with the people your family took property from. Tonight, you no longer get to choose privacy." Celeste went pale. Her elegance began peeling away in layers. She turned toward Graham as if ordering him to shut this down, but Graham only stood there, his face turning gray beneath the golden lights. Claire opened her clutch, took out her phone, and placed it on the table. No drama, no trembling, just one small movement, yet every pair of eyes in the room shifted toward her. "The Ashford file began as an ordinary inheritance dispute," she said. An elderly woman signed a transfer for lakeside land to a middle company at a price far below its real value. That company later sold the property to Kingsley Holdings. On paper, everything looked clean, but the signature was not clean, the money trail was not clean, and the people behind it were not clean. Vanessa stepped back. "Mom, what is she talking about?" Celeste answered at once. "Do not listen to her. She is only a paperwork employee." Claire looked straight at her. "Yes, I handle paperwork. That is why I know you sent an email to your private attorney 3 weeks ago, asking him to speed up the file before the Ashford heir could request a competency evaluation for the signature." Celeste froze. Graham cursed under his breath. Vanessa heard it. Ethan heard it too. For the first time, the smile vanished completely from Ethan's face. Claire continued, her voice even, but every word landed like a hammer. "I also found the Whitmore name in a secondary file. Not by coincidence. 15 years ago, my grandmother created a separate trust for me. Margaret and Harold signed over control of that trust to Ethan, claiming I was not stable enough to manage it. After that, the money was used for Ethan's business school tuition." No one took a full breath. Margaret whispered, "Claire, you do not understand the situation back then." Claire gave a very faint smile. It was not a happy one. "I understand. I understand that you took my money, then called me a failure because I had to borrow my way through school." Ethan stepped closer. "You have no right to say that in front of Vanessa." Claire turned sharply toward him. "You had no right to build your future on something you stole from me." The words struck Ethan directly. His face flushed red, then went pale. Vanessa pulled her hand away from his, as if she had touched something filthy. Graham tried to move closer to the phone, but Claire placed her hand over it first. "Copies of the file have already been sent to the Cook County Probate Court, the Vermont State Prosecutor's Office, and the attorneys representing the Ashford heirs. If anyone here thinks tonight is just a family scene, tomorrow morning they will understand that this is a case." A phone rang. Then another, then a third. Graham looked at his screen. Celeste did too. Vanessa looked at her mother, her eyes wide with panic. Claire did not need to read the message. She already knew what it said. The file had been received. "Do not speak publicly. Emergency meeting tomorrow morning." Ethan looked at Claire as if he were seeing a stranger. "You planned this." Claire looked back at him, calm in a way that was almost frightening. "No, I simply stopped protecting people who had never protected me." 6 weeks after that engagement party, the Kingsley name no longer appeared on social media pages through photos of elegant celebrations. It appeared in investigation files, in local news articles, in urgent calls between lawyers and banks, and in the avoiding eyes of people who had once competed for the chance to shake Graham Kingsley's hand. The Ashford case did not explode overnight. It collapsed more slowly, and that slowness made it hurt even more. First, the probate court reopened the transfer file for the lakeside land. Then the attorneys for the Ashford heirs requested that all transactions connected to Kingsley Holdings be frozen. After that, the Vermont State Prosecutor's Office confirmed that it was reviewing signs of elder manipulation, concealment of financial interests, and the use of a middle company to purchase property below its real value. Graham had once been the kind of man who was greeted first whenever he entered a room. Now, wherever he went, people lowered their voices. Banks that had once called him a strategic client began requesting account reviews. Partners who used to invite him to play golf suddenly became busy. People who had praised his family as a symbol of integrity began saying they only knew him socially. Celeste tried to save herself by placing everything on Graham. She told her lawyers that she was only a wife who trusted her husband, a mother who wanted to protect her daughter, a woman who had never touched a business file, but her emails did not know how to lie. The words she had once typed in comfort now returned like a blade pressed against her wrist. Vanessa called off the engagement with Ethan only 3 days after the party. There were no beautiful tears, no final embrace. She took off the ring, placed it on the Whitmore dining table, and said that Ethan had lied about too many things. About money, about education, about family, about Claire. Ethan shouted that everything was Claire's fault. He said that if she had never appeared, everything would have been fine. But that very sentence made Vanessa look at him with the coldest eyes. If the truth can ruin your future, then that future was never real, she said. Ethan moved back in with Margaret and Harold in the old suburban house. The living room that had once displayed his graduation photos was now filled with boxes brought home in a hurry. The cream-colored suit from the party was still inside a dry cleaning bag, but no one mentioned it anymore. For Ethan, the most painful part was not losing Vanessa. The most painful part was losing his audience. There was no one left standing there to applaud his performance as the perfect son. Margaret called Claire many times. At first, she left angry messages, saying Claire had humiliated the family. Then her voice softened. Then it broke. Then she began using the words Claire had waited her whole life to hear. I was wrong. I want to make it right. Claire listened to the messages inside her small apartment in Chicago. Outside the window, the city was turning into the pale gray of morning. She did not cry. Her tears had fallen too many times during the years when no one was watching. When she finally called back, Margaret started crying the moment she heard her daughter's voice. Claire, I just want our family to go back to the way it was. Claire stayed silent for a long time. Back to the way it was when you took the money Grandma left for me, or when you called me an embarrassment in front of strangers. On the other end of the line, the crying stopped. There was only the quick, uneven breathing of someone being forced for the first time to look straight at memories she had spent years editing. Harold sent Claire a handwritten letter along with a check. He said it was the money that should have belonged to her, plus what he called compensation. Claire held the check for a long time. Not because she needed it, but because a part of her had once believed that if they returned what they had taken, the wound would become smaller. But money could not buy back her 18-year-old self. It could not return the nights she worked until she was exhausted. It could not erase the feeling of being called a failure by her own family while they stood on the very thing they had taken from her. Claire did not keep the check. She donated the entire amount to an organization that supports elderly people who have been deceived in property disputes. 2 months later, Meridian Legacy Group promoted her to head of inheritance investigations. The morning she walked into her new office, sunlight fell through the glass and landed on the nameplate by the door. Claire Whitmore, not Ethan's sister, not Margaret's difficult daughter, not the shameful mark in anyone's family story. Just Claire. The woman who had once been underestimated. The woman who had once been pushed to the edge. The woman who had learned how to read what other people tried to bury. They thought her silence was weakness. But the truth was, Claire had been listening, remembering, waiting for the right moment for the truth to stand up on its own. If you were Claire, would you forgive a toxic family after they stole your chance and then called you a failure for years? Or are there some wounds that should only be closed with distance? Leave your thoughts below. If you enjoy family drama story, Reddit family drama story, hidden inheritance story, karma revenge stories, and the kind of reversal worthy of the best revenge stories, like, subscribe, and wait for the next story.